by the digital transformation. So we had looked at the digital ecosystem for the very early years. In this session, we are going to discuss comprehensive digital ecosystems for all levels of education. And we have 3 panelists for this session: Kristóf Velkey from Hungary, Stéphane Vincent Lancrin from the OECD, and Anna Cristina Dadio from UNESCO. So we are going to discuss comprehensive infrastructures and governance for digital education in countries. So these ecosystems, they include several aspects, such as the digital tools for managing the systems, the digital tools and the resources for teaching, learning, and assessing in the classroom, but also, of course, human beings and teachers who are at the core of the systems, and for instance, need to get the right professional development opportunities. So questions are about how to build a consistent system that will lead to quality digital education and hopefully benefit all students. And clearly there are many ways to develop such a system. So we'll start with a presentation from Hungary, and then we'll have a presentation on the different aspects of a comprehensive ecosystem from the perspective of OECD and non-OECD countries. We'll have a discussion after the presentation, so I invite the audience to put their question in the chat box, and we'll take this question during the discussion. So, but now I would like to invite Kristóf Velkey, who is head of department at Hungarian educational authorities, to present Hungary's digital ecosystem. So please, Kristóf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen with you. And thank you for having me here. Today, I would like to talk about the Hungarian education ecosystem and Hungary's approach to digitalization. I would like to start with how education is governed in Hungary, as there are 2 ministries responsible for education: Ministry of Interior for Public Education, and the Vocational Education and Higher Education belongs to the Culture and Innovation Ministry. And there are 3 main agencies that are responsible either for maintaining schools or doing central administrative tasks, like my institution, the Educational Authority, and they play a really important role in the education system in Hungary. It's really important to note Hungary's approach to governance, because in Hungary, the government plays a central role in education and also in the digitalization of education. So the Hungarian government tries to provide tools and resources for teachers and schools for digitalization. The digitalization currently is driven by the public education strategy for 2021 to 2030. It's a strategy for the European Union, and it's based upon the digital education strategy. And one of its main goals is to ensure that public education is responsive to challenges of the 21st century. And there are 4 main development goals to improve during this decade. I will talk on them in the following 5-6 minutes. First of all, there is a continuous development and investment in ICT infrastructure in Hungary, which is done centrally through government agencies. There are 2 main directions for it. First of all, is to ensure that all the schools have a reliable internet connection, where teachers and students also can join in and use the internet in the schools, and also to provide laptops or devices for teachers and also for students. It's an ongoing program. So currently the 7th and 10th grade students are receiving laptops, and the next year the other students will also receive computers or laptops to have equal access to the internet and digital tools. There are two main digital tools used for system and institutional management. One of them is a student information system on public education run by the Educational Authority, which collects students, teacher, and school level data and also publishes this data on public dashboards. And it has a multiple sub projects like early warning system or student admission management systems to provide schools with the tools to do online administration directly connected to the authority. The second program, it's a centrally provided learning management system, the CREATA system. It provides a platform to day-to-day management of school life, like grading, attendance, or homework. Also, it's a place for parent-teacher communication, and they also provide digital learning resources and a collaborative space for learning and an environment to manage all the things directly in this system. And these two systems are currently working interconnectedly. So there are that transfers from one to another if required by the directors, for example. Looking at digital resources, focusing mainly on public education, there are five main areas where digital resources are being developed by the educational authority or provided by other central forms. First of all, it's the digital professional development tools, which include also self-evaluation tools and professional development courses through the educational centers of the educational authority. The second of these digital resources is career guidance with an online career guidance tool and a career guidance study of 8th grader students. Also, an online assessment is taking place in each grade, the National Assessment of Basic Competencies, and also schools can access to the diagnostic assessment system for diagnostic purposes. The next broad topic is learning resources. As you can see, we are providing or preparing a lot of different educational resources for students or schools to use. And last but not least, there are possibilities for learning environments to use for schools. The rectangular ones are the ones that are not connected directly to the educational authority. All the others are provided by the different departments of the authority itself. And next one, I would like to showcase two of these tools a bit more in detail. First one is the National Public Education Portal. It's a learning management portal where there are a lot of digital materials available and can be also used by teachers creating their own materials with an adaptive test design for immediate correction and evaluation. And also these materials are prepared with a nonlinear unique learning path possibilities. As you can see here, the COVID school closures pushed a lot of schools toward this tool, and a lot of schools try to use it during the pandemic. And we can see also later on there is a more and more demand for these kind of tools in schools. In this national portal, students can also find all the teaching textbooks and teaching books online, which are being developed to be smart textbooks. So first, in 10 years ago, only static PDFs were available, which were then turned to interactive books, and now they're being turned to smart textbooks. As you can see, maybe in this video, how it was transferred in a history book that lets students explore the topic freely. The second tool I would like to talk about is the National Assessment of Basic Competencies, which is an annual full cohort standardized assessment with a student's ID used for longitudinal analysis while protecting the privacy of students. It provides online reports for schools and students after the assessment, and there was a big change for us in last year. So the tests were implemented in digital form in 2022, first in digital form in grades 6th, 8th, and 10th in reading and mathematics, and there is 2 new measurement areas, science and foreign languages, that were implemented that year, and also in the following year, grades from 4th to 11th all took the tests in the different measurement areas. Another possibility for doing using digital tools is that we can develop new measurement areas, and it's the digital culture and history assessment is currently in development, and it's planned to be available this year for students in schools. This assessment is mandated for all schools. They have to take part in it. To sum up and look forward, I just took another example that I talked now about the government's involvement in digital development, but there is a lot of edtech involvement and improvements in education. And just recently there was a summit of edtech business corporations with governments and university, and they formed a coalition to work together. And also we can see a lot of school developments with corporations like Microsoft Innovative Schools or Vodafone Schools, and digital collaboration spaces are being set up through the country. So it's a really important aspect of digitalization as well. Thank you for your attention. I hope I managed to sum up Hungary's perspective.
Thank you very much, Kristóf, for this first presentation. I think it gave us a very good idea of how a comprehensive system could look like. So we'll now move to our second panelist, who is Stéphane Vincent Lancrin. Stéphane is a senior analyst at the OECD. He overviewed the preparation of the Digital Education Outlook and is one of its main authors. So Stéphane will be happy to learn more about the main findings from this report on a comprehensive digital ecosystem across OECD countries. So Stéphane, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. So yeah, it's my pleasure to talk about what these digital ecosystems could look like and what we have actually studied as part of the Digital Education Outlook. So what I'm going to do is actually to go through the first different components of a comprehensive system, and I believe that with Hungary and what Kristóf just did, we have a very good view of what it is and how we have approached it. And basically, we've tried to separate between the digital infrastructure on the one hand and really the governance, so the enabling factors. And I will take one example of another country, because we've covered a lot of them, and I take the example of France to try to illustrate what this could also look like. So basically, there are, if you follow the conference since yesterday, we've talked a lot about the importance of human beings, and the digital competencies that they have. And so that's why we've put them at the center of that. And actually, we've considered that they are really one of a key component of the digital infrastructure, which shouldn't be just reduced to digital tools, etc. But, we should really take into account, the use of them and actually the competencies to do that. So what we've tried to look at, of course, there is a hardware. We haven't focused so much on that. We have one chapter on it, and it's obviously a prerequisite. It's an essential component to any digital education. But it is just the first, I would say, the building block. And if we really want to go towards the digital transformation, we have to really think about the other one. And for those, it's two different types of tools that we have looked at: the institutional management tools and the system management tools on the one hand, and of course the content, the teaching and learning resources. So here you can have a look at, what we found that countries were publicly providing to, their school system. So you can see that student careers guidance systems are very common. Actually, student information systems are pretty common too, but they're not universal. And then you can see, learning management systems a bit less, and for, let's say early warning systems or career guidance for teachers, etc. It's pretty rare in many of these cases. But probably one of the questions that we had when thinking about this is what if you wanted to start, to build an effective, comprehensive ecosystem, what would it actually look like? And for that, we've kind of privileged two very important tools. One are these longitudinal student information systems. And the reason for that is that, they are the ones where you can actually aggregate all the information that is collected within a system. And then actually that's one way to send it back, so of course information about the students, being able to follow them, to develop over time diagnosis tools, recommendation tools. And for that, you need to have some assessment and other types of data. Assessment is just one aspect of it. But of course, that's really one very important piece at the system level. So I've mentioned many countries do have it already. But what they often don't do is to actually provide this information back to the schools and the teachers and the students so that they can actually do something out of it in real time, rather than just, as statistics that, will episodically inform what the system is doing. And for that, in fact, to nurture these system management level tools, you need to also have some institutional management tools, and the learning management systems is really one key piece, and they have to be able to communicate about with the system management tools, and of course, obviously, to ideally provide access to pre-designed learning and teaching content. So I think that the Hungarian case was really good and strong on that, showing how in this particular case, with the key and the creator system, this was actually provided at the central level, and so that this communication could be easily allowed. And that's even true with the learning management system, the learning resources. Of course, if we want to have the digital competencies at the center of it, there has to be teacher support. And when we say teacher, it's teacher, but it's also administrators as well. And so with kind of, pre-service requirement to develop pedagogical competencies to integrate, these digital tools, in-service expectations or requirements to do that, and also support structures like, some countries have technology champions, for example, to support it, as is the case, for example, in Luxembourg, or Japan has developed, these champions as external resources for teachers to actually support them to use these different things. And of course, there can be a lot of different types of initiatives to induce the building of professional learning communities so that people can actually really better use all these digital resources and devices. So here you can see where we stand in the OECD area. So it's actually a slide a figure that you've already seen yesterday. If you've looked at it, there is about half of countries that do have some kind of rule standards for pre-service teacher training, so that they would actually require that these digital competencies are developed in pre-service, but it is actually pretty rare for in-service teacher training, so that people don't necessarily have the request to continue to develop these skills, and it is something which is very much based on their own evolution. And it's very much related to the devolution of responsibility in many countries where, for example, municipalities or schools themselves are the employers of teachers. The second dimension we've looked at is really the governance and how we enable these different things. And of course, the first thing is that you need to have a digital strategy, so that you can communicate very clearly what are the objectives of, digitalization to all the actors in the system. But then you have a lot of other aspects that you need to look at, have equity mechanisms, make sure that there is trust in the use and sharing of data. And for that, you need to have strong privacy and data protection regulation and practices. Interoperability, I've mentioned the importance of making, the data flow and making bringing back the information to the stakeholders so that it can inform their decisions. And that's one of the very important aspects of interoperability. Of course, it's given that education is a public service, largely speaking, in most OECD countries, using procurement and public procurement as a tool to achieve some of these objectives is something which is very important, and have also specific institutions, so support organizations, to implement the digital strategy, which, they can be within the ministry or they can be an external agency, but also, have mechanisms in place to ensure that different stakeholders work together and that a lot of the tools and resources that are designed within a country are actually useful and really something that the people in school and actually all the administrators will actually use. So that's a very important aspect. The last one is evaluation, but it is actually one that is rarely done. So let me focus on 2 or 3 and then move to the example. So one is around equity. One of the challenges for equity of digital education is actually the devolution of responsibilities in most education systems, and so which usually ends up with different types of access to digital resources in different places. And so here, one way, for example, to try to do that would be to define a minimum level of connectivity and digital resources in schools. So that's one thing that, for example, France is doing. It's having specific compensation schemes to balance, the local individual or the individual inequalities. So that's something that the United States is doing in terms of, connectivity and giving access to discount and public support, for different types of schools or people. It is also to provide some baseline of digital learning resources, probably having the learning resources exclusively provided by the governments. It's the most efficient way of doing it, but there is still a real importance for open educational resources on the one hand, but also a kind of minimal provision so that, in fact, we can have an equal baseline in most places within a country. And finally, as I've said, incentivizing teachers to develop their pedagogical competencies is important. On the procurement side, and we also have some specific analysis of that, actually, because of, again, the devolution of responsibility, it is often, the schools that procure or, choose what they want. And there is, usually speaking, a strong support of governments in terms of how to publicly procure digital tools. In some cases, also on what to procure. And I think that's really one aspect that is important in a good strategy and ecosystem to actually provide some kind of guidance on what should be, procured by different actors. And so that's really a very strong tool to have some minimum quality standards. We've talked about some possibilities. It is usually mainly reduced to security and cybersecurity at this point, and some levels of data protection in many countries. But it could actually be used to make sure that some of the resources are effective and that they do what they say that they do, that they don't include, a bias or algorithmic bias or amplify it, that, they can be accessible to people with special needs, for example, and that there is some level of inclusivity that is embedded in all these different processes. And the last point I wanted to highlight is interoperability. And there are a lot of different ways of doing that. One of it is to provide different tools that actually facilitate the interoperability across digital tools. So it's usually technical tools, interfaces that allow to, connect to one device, and that will, make different tools be able to communicate. But it can also be, by making sure that the data are provided in a specific format, or that there is data portability, which is mandatory, for example. It can be around the provision of open source platforms, so as they do in India, where they have student information systems, which is based on the similar open source that all the different states in the country can customize. Or it can be having a national platform where people will have an incentive to put their different initiatives and products, as Germany is trying to develop as we speak. And of course, it's around the data standards and taxonomies for learning resources as well. So the second thing that we've done, we have the digital education outlook, but it comes with a companion, and actually it shows from the perspective of one specific country, giving a lot of different types of elements. So one is the devolution of responsibility that I've mentioned, and how they affect, the way that things work within a country. But it's also, covering all the different things that I have mentioned before, including the relations with the edtech companies and other education stakeholders. And of course, we have one on Hungary, and we have one on 28 other countries, and also the French and the Flemish communities of Belgium. So let me take one example of a relatively comprehensive ecosystem, and that's the French one. So if so France has a national student information systems for primary and secondary. The learning management system is not provided at the central level, but most schools have one, and it is actually done at the regional level, but with central characteristics, which are technical characteristics, which are actually required so that they can be interoperable with some of the student information systems. They also provide, in a mixed model, several national banks of digital teaching and learning resources. So you have the BRNE, so that's a bank of digital educational resources, and they also have the Canopy network for teachers, and which is an interesting mix of closed and open content. So some of these resources are open access, and some of them are licensed from commercial publishers, and they are made available to students and teachers of a specific grade, so that in fact they can use it. But it is supplemented by the choices that each school and teachers also do, or that they have at the more local level, so that they really serve as a kind of baseline for everyone. The digital competencies are formally part of the pre-service teacher requirements, and they are actually, that's because the way of accessing to the teaching profession is to have a competitive examination, then they can be part of it. And they have also developed at the regional level support mechanism with digital education advisors that actually support the teachers in their different academies to develop their skills. On the governance aspect, they also have a very strong data and technology governance. In fact, France is one of the few countries that does have some rules on technology already, before the AI Act in Europe is going to be passed, and for example, it is, algorithms have to be explainable to lay people and explained, and a lot of possible utilizations of AI are possible for research, usually speaking, but not as a regular type of uses. So in terms of data protection, they have a digital platform which is called the Resource Access Management, or Gestion d'accès des ressources, to ensure data protection so that, in fact, when you go through that platform, the vendors cannot have access to the actual identity of the people who use their resources. So whether they are the teachers or whether they are the students. And also it is a platform that is used to ensure a minimum level of interoperability. So basically, it is not mandatory to necessarily to be on that platform, but it is a very strong incentive. And it is really one way for France to use it as a procurement platform as well as a policy level to achieve coherence of the system. One of the things they do, for example, to make the learning resources more findable is to have a central taxonomy for the resources based on the curriculum, and they have a specific standard for that. And they do, occasional, not very often, but occasional evaluation of the use of all these digital tools, and also work with the edtech companies a bit in this way that Kristóf has shown us in the case of Hungary. So one thing that it has changed, because of course the big question of having a coherent system is also what it changes in terms of processes. And I would say in the case of France, what I would personally give as an example of, the admission platform that they have. So it's probably one of the things that gets the closest to automated decision making. It's not automated. In fact, it's just a recommendation making tools. But both to go from middle school to high school and from high school to higher education, they've introduced these platforms, which are kind of matching platforms. In the case of the going from middle school to high school, it was actually also used as a way to change the social mix in some big cities like Paris, and to see, who would enroll in all the different high schools in the system, and using algorithm that would take into account, socioeconomic background of the students. And in the case of the transition from higher education, from high school to higher education, the new platform was actually a way to introduce some level of selectivity in the admission in French higher education, and so have possibly a better completion of the student studies on time. So that's something that has changed some aspects. I would say there are many things that France can do, and they're working on it to make the digital ecosystem more even more coherent and comprehensive. But it is one of the examples that we have in our book where all the different components are really I would say well thought through. Now we have more examples and more country approaches that we cover, and there are many other ways of doing it than what we have seen, what I've just presented in the French case, for example, and actually also cases where, for example, the student information system that I have highlighted as one of the key aspects of a good comprehensive ecosystem is just one piece among many, and that would be, for example, the case in Estonia or in New Zealand, and we have other very countries with very strong approaches and long-standing ones like Korea as well that have shown very comprehensive ways of making the different aspects of their digital strategy to match. So I will stop here, and thank you very much, and look forward to the discussion.
So thanks a lot, Stéphane, for this presentation. You made it clear that a digital system is not only about infrastructures. In the end, we want to have digital education that adds value to all students, teachers, and more generally to economies and society. So you need more than the digital infrastructure. I'm turning now to our last panelist, who is Anna Cristina Daggio. Anna is a senior policy analyst at UNESCO, working on the Global Education Monitoring Report. And this year, the edition was on technology in education. So Anna, we would like to have your perspective on non-OECD countries for this topic. Please, Anna, the floor is yours.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank you for having me and the GEM report here. It's really a pleasure to discuss the findings of the GEM report on technology in education that we launched in July this year. And what is really nice is the previous presentation by Kristóf and Stefan really align with many of the findings and the issues we have in the report. So to start with, the main point is that in preparing this report on technology in education, we have not started from the common way of looking at it, so looking at technology. We have looked at how what are the issues that technology could solve, and what are the problems, the main issues that can be really discussed about education. And these are issues of equity and inclusion, issues of quality, and issues of efficiency. And in fact, many of the discussions about technology focus on technology itself rather than focusing on education. And in terms of equity, we have seen that technology offers an educational lifeline for millions, as it does, for instance, for people with disabilities, for refugees, just to cite some of the groups marginalized, but it can exclude many more, as it did, for instance, during the COVID, where 72% of the poorest children and youth were excluded from online learning. And also in terms of quality, the report highlights that some education technology can improve some type of learnings in some context. And concerning efficiency, various issues that I will briefly touch during my presentation prevent the use of technology in education management from fulfilling its potential. So the first important thing to say is that in terms of quality, it's just some technology, some education technology can improve some types of learning in some contexts. Because too much often, the focus is still on digital inputs rather than being on learning outcomes. And for instance, there are plenty of examples from different countries on the one-to-one technology, like the distribution of laptops that were carried out without really concentrated and focusing on the impacts of learners, on the impacts and on the classroom. And very often what has been found is that, in fact, when the laptops are distributed without preparing teachers, without any kind of previous formation and the preparedness of teacher, this doesn't really fulfill their potential. At the same time, technology can be detrimental. Digital technology can be detrimental if it is excessive, and there is an increasing number of studies that show, for instance, that exposure to screens, even if it can improve learning, accessing online resources, it also negatively affects children's well-being in a larger range of domain, extending really beyond educational outcomes, including psychology, distress, obesity. So physical and mental issues may be associated. And another important point is that technology doesn't need to be advanced to be effective. And there are also here many examples showing that, for instance, radio and television have helped many people to learn and to access education. And even, for instance, in these cases, an example from China where recorded lessons from good teachers were broadcasted to 100 million of rural students, and the evaluation carried out years after shown that this has improved learning outcomes and also earnings by 32%. And it's important to highlight that digital transformation are putting a lot of strains on education system to adapt, but countries are starting to define digital skills they want to prioritize in curriculum and assessment standards. We heard that from the previous presentation. We have a great example in Europe with the DIGCOMP, for instance, framework. And we have looked at this issue globally, and we have seen that 54% of countries have digital skill standards. But in many cases, what is maybe worrisome is that in many cases, these have been defined by non-state actors and mostly commercial actors. Many students have not a chance to use and to practice with digital technology in schools. Globally, 40% of primary and 50% of lower secondary and 65% of upper secondary school are connected to internet. So you can imagine how many are not by simple calculations. And also, looking at teachers, teachers often feel unprepared and they don't feel confident to teaching with technology. What is also interesting that there is also an increasing number of attacks to education, and few teacher training exists on cybersecurity. Concerning the education management and the importance of technology in education management, there are also some issues. Countries lack capacity. There are very few countries globally that use student identity numbers, and also countries that do invest in data struggle a lot. And just to highlight also that online content has grown a lot without enough regulation, with the risk of making education less relevant than it should be. For example, if we look at open education resources, 92% of the content is in English, which may marginalize particular group with using particular language. However, it's also true that technology helps content creation, adaptation, access, and distribution, and can drastically reduce cost. An important issue to highlight here is that very often technology is often both to plug a gap with no view on the long-term cost for national budgets. For instance, if estimation by the GEM report has shown that basic digital learning scenario for poor countries would add 50% of funding gaps in their struggle to reach SDG targets, and it will cost $1 billion to maintain connectivity in these countries. For children's well-being, only very few countries have banned smartphone in schools. Some have done with really particular focus on marginalized group or people with disabilities, or for pedagogical reasons. Only 1 in 5 in low-income countries have this kind of regulation. And for the planets, this is an important issue that is also related to the issue of procurement. Very few countries look at this when they procure. However, it's important to look at the issue of the impact of technology on material and infrastructure. We have seen, for instance, that there is one estimated that showed that extending the lifespan of all laptops in the European Union would be equivalent to taking almost 1 million cars off the road in terms of CO2 emission. And almost final point is that, and I think this is really important for the discussion we are having here, is that good impartial evidence on education is still very rare. Education technology evolves very fast, very quickly, and but not enough to keep up the pace with the evaluation, because products change every 36 months, every 3 years, and technology is adopted with very little evidence. An example for the United States show that less than 1 in 5 of the top 100 education technology tools that are used in the classroom met the requirement of the Every Student Succeed Act, and that an average of 60% of education software licenses were unused and 98% were not used intensively. And also that a lot of evidence is generated by those that trying to sell it. Raising a lot of question about what is the technology that really helps in education. And this is really something that I would like to conclude with that, because it's really something that is important and has been brought by previous speakers. The importance of sound infrastructure and clear governance and transparent governance structure is really essential to achieve a digital transformation, because in many countries there is still a huge fragmentation of governance in education technology between ministries that are not Ministry of Education. Only in 48% of countries globally, Ministry of Education lead education technology, a little bit more, 51% in low-income countries. And also, really the fact that when we talk about infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, the value for money is something that is very important, because it is not what the face value that infrastructure that really matters, it's the total cost of ownership. And very often this is really what we see is the 25th one, it's really a little part, is 25% of the total cost. So, and to conclude, the important issue that digital privacy, safety, and well-being need to be regulated. Only 16% of countries guarantee data privacy in education with a law, and there are 3% in low income. Some examples here is Malawi and Uganda that have aligned their data privacy law with the GDPR. And I will really conclude with this chart. We have prepared profiles enhancing education reviews on technology as with other theme of the report, and preparing these profiles has helped us to map some of the important issues that we have covered in the report. So the number of countries guarantee data privacy in education, the regulation of the use of personal devices in school, when we move to bring your own device in school or bring your own technology in schools, the cash transfer, the subsidies that are granted to purchase devices. You can see here only 1 in 5 countries grant this type of devices, and still very low, very few countries have low provision of electricity when we look at the issue globally. I close here. I think we will discuss more about the recommendation in later in the panel, but it's really with these 4 questions for us that technology to be adopted in schools. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anna, for this presentation, and thank you for also mentioning the need to manage the risk. Of course, it's important to bid on opportunities, but also to manage the risk, and often teachers are unprepared. I think you made it very clear that countries should advance at their own pace and perhaps differently, and that the transition to digital education should be progressive. So we are now turning to the discussion. We have limited time for the discussion, but a little bit, and we have interesting questions in the chat. So I'm moving back to Kristóf and asking about how you see your digital ecosystem evolving in the coming years. And especially we have a very interesting question in the chat asking about how you can make sure that you will be able to accommodate for the evolution of technologies and different technologies that might appear, how you can ensure that your ecosystem is flexible enough to accommodate these changes. So please, Kristóf, could you a bit answer these questions?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So I think one of the main things to do till yet is to harmonize the data and the databases even more. So there are possible connections between the different platforms with an API as they are cloud-based servers. But there is a lot of work to be done yet to to do the regulations even. For example, if we are talking about student measurement data, it's protected by another individual measurement ID, and in that way it cannot be connected to students because it also involves background information. Can involve background information, and they have to be legally also changed to find a way to incorporate all the data moving on. And I'm not sure about how to ensure the scaling and flexibility of the system. I'm sure that it's a lot of work to be done yet, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's a complicated question. So I think I would be interested hearing from Stefan and from the report. I'm sure this question came up. So Stefan, I mean, what's your views? I mean, how can we perhaps try to have a system that is sufficiently flexible to accommodate for changes in trends?
Well, I would say that there are two important or three important components to that. One is one that Anna has mentioned, and actually it's keeping in mind that you need continuous resources to be able to keep a flexible system, and so it has a cost, and also you need to have the competencies, the continuous competencies to do that. The second part is really on interoperability. And so that's really one of the things that interoperability is trying to accommodate, and the idea is to integrate gradually, the legacy systems and the new systems, so the one you already have that are, pretty old with the new ones. Of course, one of the things for the flexibility of it is that technical standards don't change all the time, but they will change at some point, and so that from time to time, you will have to do a kind of a new jump, and to go to new types of technology. So it cannot be entirely flexible. You will still have to have the different systems coexisting, at different points of time. But this is actually what technology does, and I think all of us can experience it with our own computers, or devices, and how, well, at some point, some get a bit have difficulties to adapt to the new standards, but there are a lot of that are actually being designed to make it work.
Thank you. I mean, a question, perhaps a question to Anna that we have in the chat. I mean, that's relevant for all countries, but yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, in the end, are we talking about teaching traditional subjects and skills with the digital technologies, or are we talking about teaching new capabilities in new ways? I mean, I think we want to do both. But yes. I mean, yes, but that's, I mean, also from non-OECD countries, what's the view on this? And I mean, is this perhaps trying something first and then a next step?
So thanks a lot. That's a very important question, and I think it's really it's also answering a little bit to the previous question, how to ensure scalability and flexibility. Because in fact, if we want to, as I said at the end of my presentation, there are 4 questions that we need to ask before deploying education technology, and in particular, the one on is it scalable or is it appropriate? Allows to answer also the question to what we want our children to learn. And what is interesting to know is that to achieve this decision to deploy technology in education, we need to have a very broad digital curricula framework that also look at traditional, I would say, subjects, because what the evidence shows is, for instance, that those that have the strongest reading skill were 5% likely to be misled by phishing emails. By contrast, 24% of those that had the weakest skill in this domain was more likely to be misled by phishing mails. So yes, of course, when we say we need to have broad digital curriculum framework, is that there are subjects, new subjects that should be looked at, but also traditional subjects, because it is critical to learn to have numeracy and literacy skills, and these really help to develop and to tackle much more complex issues, I think, and develop critical thinking about what is, for instance, to distinguish a fake news by what is really the reality.
Thank you, Anna. Unfortunately, we are already at the end of this session. I think we have already understood better what an ecosystem could be, but it's also clear that there is a lot of progress and a lot of challenges moving ahead, and a lot to learn from various country experiences. So I would like to thank presenters and participants for this very good session. The next session will start in a couple of minutes. This will be on the OECD's platform for innovating learning assessments. So to answer one question in the chat, indeed, the OECD is also working on this topic. So this is a new platform that the OECD is launching. So it's a very promising session. Again, I would like to thank all of you for your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.